Hello, good morning. It is your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, and today's date is Friday, November 7th, 2025. The time is 10:33 p.m. 10:33 a.m., and I am in Miami, Florida. The topic of today's lecture is The Ghosts of Christmas Past, Part 2, pay-per-view. You will note, really right off of the bat, that the title of this lecture is peculiar. And the reason the title of this lecture is peculiar is because the topic of the lecture is itself peculiar. I've said it in past discourses. You can get plugged in to somebody's gangstalking campaign if you press the right buttons, if you talk to the right people, and if you pay the right money. Okay? We're going to get into the pay-per-view element of clandestine gangstalking right in a minute. Okay? There was a time in American history where if somebody made you angry, I'm talking so angry that the anger was seeping through your very pores, that people did some pretty thuggish things to get back at people. And they didn't just do horrible things to the person they wanted to get revenge on. They would attack that person's loved ones, their friends and family. Sometimes they'd attack their property. Or they would pay some knucklehead to go and attack their property or attack them. You know, it kind of reminds me of that movie Cape Fear, starring Robert De Niro and Gary Busey, if I'm not mistaken, where Robert De Niro plays Max Cady, a newly freed career criminal who was sent to jail for decades by a prosecutor played by Busey's character in a small town. I believe the town was fiction. And what happened was, so when Max Cady finished his prison term, which I think was 20 years or something, the first thing he did when he got out of prison in this movie Cape Fear, which, if I'm not mistaken, was directed by Martin Scorsese in 1991, the first thing this escaped convict did in this movie, or not escaped convict, but newly freed convict, was he decided to put together a plot to take revenge on the prosecutor that sent him to jail for all those years. And he began to plot and scheme. He already knew the guy's name, and that's half the battle, quite frankly. But then he put together a scheme, not necessarily to kill the prosecutor. That wasn't his goal. Max Cady's goal in this film was to degrade the prosecutor, degrade his family, degrade his quality of life, cause this prosecutor to feel as if he was not safe in his job, to make the prosecutor feel like there's some act of divine retribution that's happening right now that has manifested through the actions of Max Cady. Now, the first thing Cady did was, when he got out of prison, was he walked right up to this prosecutor that had sent him to prison all those years ago on a rape charge that Cady believes he was wrongfully convicted of. And after having done those decades in prison, he got out, he devised this scheme, and he approached this attorney, this prosecutor, right in the middle of broad daylight, not far from where the prosecutor was getting off work that day. He recognized him, and he walked right up to him, and he said, "Hello, do you remember me?" The prosecutor told him, "No, I don't remember you. Who are you?" Because mind you, this situation, this guy's been in jail 20 years. And prosecutors don't keep a mental note of everyone they prosecute or convict of a crime or send to prison. And the guy said, "My name is Max Cady. You sent me to jail 20 years ago on a fraudulent rape charge. And I want you to look me in the face. I want you to apologize," and so forth. And eventually the prosecutor just sort of ended the conversation and went on about his separate way. But it wasn't over. You see, the newly freed convict was not satisfied. Of his encounter. Those years he spent in prison, he's not going to get them back. And he believes that he's owed something for his lost years. Now, we'll find out later in the movie that Cady really did commit the rape, and not only did he commit the rape, but he's a serial rapist and just a very deviant individual altogether. But he wanted an excuse, a scapegoat, to stalk and pester this prosecutor. Okay, and you'll see where I tie this story into the Ghost of Christmas Past lecture presently. But I want to finish this narrative because it's important with respect to its similarities to the matter. So, eventually, Cady, this Max Cady, this newly freed convict, devised a scheme to disrupt the life of the prosecutor. So then Cady started looking at the guy's wife when this prosecutor, played by Gary Busey, was at work. His wife stayed home. And they had a beautiful plantation-style estate. This prosecutor and his wife, they were very successful together, and the wife stayed home. Eventually, Cady found out where she lived and started driving by her house, looking at her, harassing her, looking through the windows at her, flirting with her. That's right. This newly escaped convict is flirting with the wife of the prosecutor that sent him to prison all those years ago. Okay? The wife doesn't look terribly interested in the guy, although she's fascinated with his behavior and his demeanor. Next thing you know, the prosecutor's 15-year-old daughter comes strutting out. And there are some scenes in Hollywood cinema that you just don't forget. Some of these scenes are ones that you savor and you recall them because you enjoy the memory of them. And some movie scenes you wish you could unsee. But this is one of the memorable ones nonetheless. The 15-year-old girl comes walking out and the mother looks over at her daughter horrified because she's starting to suspect that this man who she keeps seeing drive back and forth in front of their house is perhaps a convict and perhaps one that her husband prosecuted. But when the 15-year-old daughter walks out, Max Cady takes one look at her and says, "I got my wild card," and then he speeds off. At this point, the person is sending hostile and threatening messages to the prosecutor and leaving all kinds of weird insignias on his doorstep and all kinds of symbiology. All right, the prosecutor's starting to suspect he is being victimized by a person he'd prosecuted in the past. He starts talking to people. Okay. He goes to the police and says, "I think there's a guy stalking my family." Police say, "What's his business with you?" He says, "I think it's somebody I prosecuted years ago." They said, "Well, what's he doing?" He starts explaining some of the stuff, and they say, "Well, are you seeing him do this stuff? Putting these items on your driveway, putting these items on your doorstep, on your front porch, and are you seeing him?" "No, I'm not seeing him, but I know he's the one doing it." "Well, how do you know he's the one doing it? How do you know it's not a bunch of kids playing a prank?" "Well, because he approached me one time and said he was angry at me for prosecuting." "A lot of guys get angry at the prosecutor that sends them to jail," they reply. But ultimately, we need evidence to prosecute this guy. And one of the detectives pulls him to the side and says, "Listen, I know what a pain this guy is. I don't doubt for a second that he's the one doing it. We just don't have the evidence right now to convict. But I'll recommend something to you. Carry a piece on you at all times. And I know a few guys you could pay." He said, "I know a few lowlifes you can pay to jump them with a baseball bat somewhere if you want." He looked over at the detective and said, "Yeah, what do I pay him?" The detective tells him, "Well, that's something you got to work out with him." Now, mind you, ladies and gentlemen, this movie is not a movie that belittles or degrades the work of detectives. Okay? It's just sort of, it introduces the viewer to the reality, okay, that even in the law enforcement profession, there are sometimes matters where following proper procedure is too slow an option. Okay. So the guy goes out and pays some guys. "Hey, there's a guy named Max Cady. This is what he looks like. This is where I see him from time to time. I want to pay you guys $400 a piece to whack him in the head with a bike chain." All right, and they're lowlifes. They're thugs. They're probably going to blow the whole $400 on meth or something. So yeah, they took it. Now, in the meantime, Max Cady is in the process of trying to take the prosecutor's daughter's virginity. The prosecutor's daughter is 15 years old, never had a boyfriend, but Cady found a way to infiltrate her high school and essentially try and seduce this girl. So eventually he finds her alone in the auditorium one day after some recital that she had. And he approached her as a man that she could go to when her parents were acting like they just didn't understand her. And they bonded very deeply, and Max Cady ended up French kissing this 15-year-old girl right there in her high school auditorium. All right, so he's making his move on the prosecutor's family. He's intimidated the prosecutor. He's sexually pestered the prosecutor's wife. And now he's sharing a passionate kiss with the prosecutor's 15-year-old daughter. All in an attempt to exact revenge against the prosecutor for sending him to jail all those years ago. Now, eventually, Cady is confronted with those thugs who were paid to harm him. And they got a few hits in, but eventually he picked up a crowbar and bashed all their heads in. So that gang that was paid to harm him, they all ended up getting annihilated, eliminated, wiped out, massacred. But Cady, in the back of his mind, knew, you know what, the prosecutor was behind this. There's no doubt in my mind he paid those people. So the drama progresses over the next hour or so in this movie, and in the climax, the prosecutor and a hunting buddy of his get together and devise a scheme to kill Max Cady in self-defense, etc. And it ends with the two of them knocking him off of a yacht into a body of water. And he drowns. So that was how that movie ended. But excellently directed movie, excellently rendered movie, really good actors and actresses, amazing plot. This movie was actually a remake of the Cape Fear movie, I think of the 1950s. The original Cape Fear movie came out in the 1950s. And I think it starred Gregory Peck, who was the star of the American classic To Kill a Mockingbird, that film. Peck was the prosecutor in the 1950s version. And the guy that played Max Cady's role in the 1950s version was, I can't quite recall his name right this second, but he was a phenomenal actor overall. And there was one particular scene in the 1950s version that I don't think was in the 1990s version, and that was where the escaped convict, the escaped criminal, the stalker in the movie, Max Cady, calls the prosecutor on his work phone and tells him, you know, I'm gonna kidnap your wife and daughter, and I'm gonna make sure that that's a night that they never forget. They ain't never gonna forget it, and neither will you, counselor. Right? That movie certainly sought to capture the disdain that criminals can have for the criminal justice system once convicted of a crime. Let's analyze the themes in Cape Fear and apply it to gangstalking for a second. Now, I call this video The Ghost of Christmas Past. And this being with reference to the mechanism that I have experienced probably over the past 20 to 25 years, but having seen it more clearly than ever over the past 6 months. The capacity for people from your past, people who you may have not left off on good terms with, people who may have wronged you, or maybe you wronged them, or perhaps they angered you or you angered them, or the possibility of them having schemed on you or you having schemed on them, or maybe you were violent with them, or maybe they were violent with you. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why people become disillusioned with each other. But picture a situation where people from your past, people you may have not seen anywhere from 15 to 25 years ago, begin re-emerging, and not just one, but in groups. Maybe people who knew you from here and there somehow come in contact with other people who knew you from there and here. And they get together and perhaps they realize that you're a mutual acquaintance, and you strike up a conversation, and maybe you tick both of them off at some point in your life, and they go, man, it really would feel good to get back at that guy, wouldn't it? The other party say, yeah, it would. But how are you going to do that? Most people, especially in the digital age, refrain from violence. They refrain from acts that could jeopardize their future. Plus, we live excuse me. We live in a digital world. We live in a surveilled world. It's possible that you'll be caught if you do like the prosecutor in Cape Fear did and try to hire some punks or some thugs to harm a person. So, what if someone were to tell you, well, I could help you get back at that guy? I could help you get back at the person that ticked you off all those years ago. What happened? All you got to do is make up a lie. You could say, well, one day he took a brick and threw it through all the windows in my house and terrorized my mama while I was at school one day. You could make up a story. You could say, well, one time I saw him, he grabbed my dog and threw my German Shepherd out into the street, and it got ran over by a Mack truck, and I was just a little boy and I had to watch that. Right? You can make something up. They'd be like, well, I could get you into some touch with some people that know who he is, that know where he is, and we know just how to make it so that very little of the evidence that's created during this crime comes back to you. All right? So the gang stalking matter is pitched to them. They figure out how it works and they participate in it in various capacities against a person that they had a problem with so many years ago. If you have that much of a grudge against the person to where you hold it for 20, 25 years, to where you want to do something to that person because of that, well, you need an occupation or a hobby or a spouse or something to keep your mind off that other person. Why is this person still bugging you 10, 15, 25 years after the fact? If you haven't heard from the person in that long, you're probably not on his mind. Aren't both of you better off just leaving each other alone, parting your separate ways, etc., etc.? I tend to think so. But like Max Cady in that movie Cape Fear, sometimes people have a hard time letting stuff go. It takes character to put away a grudge. Apparently Max Cady didn't have much character, because as soon as he did his 20 years, the first thing he did when he got out was look for the prosecutor to take revenge on him. It takes a very vindictive person to hold a grudge for 10, 15, or 25 years about something. Like I said, you might be making up something. There might be something else about this person that angers you. Maybe you feel inferior to this person. Or maybe this person is somebody that you want to be, or has done something that you want to do, but can't for this reason or that. People who hold grudges oftentimes use false narratives to keep those grudges alive. They're constantly pouring gasoline on the fire, as they say. So that they'll have a reason to get back at this person for whatever the reason is. Now, in Kendall, particularly over the last 6 months, and mind you, I do a citizen patrol assignment in Kendall ever so often. It's a good hobby. It's a way of giving back to the county, and it allows me to observe the movements of gang stalkers up close and personal. So in Kendall, I started seeing people that I knew from 10, 15, 25 years ago, and I guess they thought that because it's been so long that I would not recognize them. But that's one thing about me, ladies and gentlemen. I don't forget a face. Faces stand out to me very deeply, as do names. Okay, I don't forget many faces, and I don't forget many names. I mean, if I were in a room right now with people I went to elementary school with, even as adults, I would be able to recognize their faces and tell you their names. Right here, right now, 30 years later. Okay, it's a gift that I have. Okay, you remember that comic book, Where's Waldo? It was real popular in the 90s. It was a comic book where you would flip a page and there was all these people and animals and structures and vehicles and all this ruckus going on in the picture. And in this picture, which contained hundreds or thousands of small images, You were expected as the reader to find one of those images, and that was the titular character, Waldo. And if you found Waldo in the middle of all this ruckus that was going on in the page, you could turn the page and see if you could find him on the next page. You know, it wasn't like that board game, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? Okay, where you had to find that international jewel thief. Okay, the woman in the hat and the trench coat, Carmen Sandiego. That was a puzzle type of game. Whereas Waldo was about your ability to pinpoint with your natural vision a small image on a page full of big images. So I was the kid that could always find Waldo. It was difficult sometimes, but I always found him. Okay, that's just the way my mind works. It's the way I focus on objects that I encounter. I don't forget a face. And as a matter of fact, if you approached me with a pair of sunglasses and a hat one day, and I was able to observe you, a month later you could approach me without that hat and sunglasses, a total stranger, and I would be able to identify you as the person that I saw with the hat and sunglasses so many months earlier. Okay, I can envision what someone's going to look like. I could see a 10-year-old child right now of any background or race and observe that child and then not see that child again for 10 years when that child is 20. And if I were to see that grown child somewhere else, I would be able to identify that adult as the 10-year-old child that I saw all those years ago. My brain simply focuses very intensely on objects and people. Okay, and especially persons like the ones I've seen over in Kendall over the past 6 months, these people that I knew fairly well, anywhere from 10 to 25 years ago. Okay, it's like they're working in tandem, and it wouldn't be difficult because there's a communication system that runs from me to my maternal family typically, which usually trickles over into the ears of people I used to go to school with. And then they trickle that information to other people in the Cleveland or greater Cleveland area that knew me. And that information ball that's created oftentimes trickles into the ears of people that I know in another state or people that I'm acquainted with in another state. It is not difficult to set up a communications network where information starts at a source, then goes to another source, and then goes to several other sources, and then they're able to use the World Wide Web and other digital resources to pinpoint your exact location and who you're around and what public and private records you've generated over the past 15 or 25 years. It's easy to obtain this information in the digital age. You see, so this flow of information can follow you anywhere, so long as the people who are keeping tabs on you know where you are at all times. You see, if I were to leave Florida right now and move to Hawaii or Arizona or Texas or North Dakota or Iowa, okay, there are going to be people that know. Okay, I don't mind being watched or surveilled. We live in a digital world. Okay, make it professional and everything is kosher. You see? Ultimately, though, ladies and gentlemen, when people who knew you many years ago just like Max Cady versus the prosecutor, and you've had an experience with them that you think has harmed you in some way, and you want to get revenge, gang stalking offers them the opportunity to take that revenge in a controlled, moderated, and orderly way. You know, they're not saying, well, here's where he sleeps. I could teach you how to pick locks so you can bust in his house at night and do whatever to him. You know, pay me $15,000 and I'll tell you everything you want to know about him. It's not like that anymore. Although I wouldn't doubt that stuff like that happens. I mean, stuff like that happens in big cities more often than small cities. And sometimes people who experience that lifestyle in small cities where they take money to do crimes, or excuse me, people who lived in big cities who lived that lifestyle where they were taking money for crimes and organized criminal activity, when they go to small cities, if they ever move to a small city, they feel like a big fish in a small pond. And sometimes they try to get similar enterprises going in the small cities that they live in. Okay? But these people that I'm seeing from various intervals in my life over the past 10 to 25 years, okay, it's obvious they're operating off of the same source and they're operating off of the same network, okay? You know, I don't, as surely as I don't forget a name or a face, I don't typically forget circumstances or scenarios either. I know to this day, in any institution that I've been a part of, whether it's a school or a high school or a community college or a university or a church or a place of employment that I've worked in the past, okay? Despite all of where I knew you, I remember my interactions with you in all of these places. I remember in any job I've ever had which coworkers I favored and which ones I didn't. I remember in every church I've ever been a part of who I fellowshipped with and who I didn't. And mind you, in a church setting, you fellowship with the people that you have chemistry with, etc. It's not so much a matter of liking and disliking in a church setting. It's just whoever you have the best chemistry with, those are the people you typically fellowship with on Sundays. But ultimately, you know, it could be any of these institutions. Okay, I remember in every college I had which professors I favored. I can remember in every college I've ever been to which students I favored and which ones I thought favored me as well. As with all of the examples I'm giving you, I remember who I favored and who favored me. And I remember who I didn't favor and who didn't favor me. I don't forget these things because I believe they're important to remember. In case of times like these, you never know what a person's gonna do. Some Joe Schmo, blow, smuck, spy, okay, nose always in the air type, using a signaling mechanism because he wants to know what you're up to live and in person. Because 25 years ago, you were an interesting fellow, and they want to see what kind of a fellow you, quote, turned out to be. And we don't want them to know we're spying. So we're going to use wigs and disguises, etc., etc. We're going to speed past them in cars when given the signal. And we want to tail him for a few days and weeks. We want to know what his life is like. You see? It's nosiness on steroids, ladies and gentlemen. That's what gang stalking is. Alright, a bunch of grown middle-aged men that I haven't seen in 25 years doing a clandestine signaling mechanism, complete with espionage tactics, to find out what I'm doing and where I'm at so they can start a false narrative of their own and spread it around to people who might be curious about me from 25 years ago that knew me. Hey, you remember that guy from high school? Hey, you remember that guy from college? Hey, you remember that coworker we had? The one that was real peculiar. Well, I know what's up with him, and not only do I know what's up with him, but I've seen him in person and I know what his life is like. Oh, really? What's he up to these days? All the while, malice and discontentment, hostility, all these things are brewing in the background. All right, you don't use espionage tactics on a friend. You don't use subversion tactics on a friend. You don't pay mindless thugs to use acts of physical violence against a friend. No, you do those things behind the scenes to a person that you don't want to know is behind the whole thing. Okay, you don't want this person to know that you're behind the whole thing. You want all this horror to happen to this person blindly so you can maximize the hurt and the damage that it does to this person, but you messed with the wrong one is what I'm telling you, fellas. All right, it doesn't matter where I knew you. I could have known you from middle school. I could have known you from high school. I could have known you from college. I could have known you from work. Matter of fact, I wouldn't. That as nosy as some of these people are, the ones that I'm talking about right now, the people I knew 25 years ago, they probably found a way to get in contact with my coworkers, my former supervisors, people who knew me personally, former classmates and teachers. They probably found a way to get in touch with them using some Weasley mechanism. Maybe they pretended they were doing a survey or something. Call up one of my professors. Hey, we wanted to ask you about a number of students you had in the fall semester of 2016. Can we talk? Right? Gang stalkers use all kinds of sneaky, Weasley, deceptive, stringy tactics to get information on people so that they can beef up their gang stalking campaign against you. Because keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, you can do more damage to a targeted person with information as opposed to the damage you could do to that targeted person without information. The more you know about that person, their lifestyle, their proclivities, their past, their family history, academic history, work history, personal beliefs, voting records, all of these things go into sort of the recipe for what it takes to put together a good gang stalking campaign against somebody. I mean, look, you know, I realize that any institution I've been to over the past 25 years, it could be work, it could be church, it could be school, okay? It could be an athletic program. Okay, I've made a splash. It happens. When you have institutions in which various persons can stand out based on this or that characteristic, some people seem to stand out. Sometimes people stand out who aren't necessarily looking to stand out. But ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, I stood out. And sometimes when you stand out, you get fans, sometimes you get friends, sometimes you get admirers, and sometimes you get people who look to oppose you. And that's regardless if you do your job well. That's regardless of if you play your sport well. Regardless of if you do your assignments well. Okay, regardless of if you're an A student or a C student, regardless of if you are able to score 50 points a game in a football game or 10 points a game in a football game over the course of a season. Regardless of if you are a person that can preach a good sermon or you're a person that can preach an average sermon at church. Okay, whether you're able to close $5 million in advertising accounts at your company, or whether you can only close a couple $100 in advertising accounts in your company. Okay, with respect to your output as an employee in the marketing department, regardless of what kind of an asset you are to this institution or that institution, or regardless of your talent or potential, there are always going to simply be persons who oppose you. And when you encounter this kind of opposition, no, yes, no problem. I was speaking to a lady here at the bus stop that was asking me if the bus had already left, and I said no. Regardless of what you bring to the table in any institution, okay, there are always going to be people that oppose you on that. And I'm not just talking about your opponents. I'm talking about those in your own network, or people on your, what you might describe as your team or your collective or your group or your designation, or people in your department, etc., etc. There are always going to be people that oppose you. I mean, would you believe that superstar athletes that play team sports like Michael Jordan, Joe Montana, Wayne Gretzky, okay, Mario Andretti, all right, Pele, Michael Johnson, a lot of these superstar athletes that were the cornerstone of their athletic franchise were disliked by some of their own teammates for this reason or that. There are superstar salesmen at various companies that are disliked by some of their co-workers, even though they put up phenomenal sales figures and are on top of things. All right. There are hotshot attorneys that are partners in luxurious law firms that are disliked by some of the workers there. As a matter of fact, you could have a top-notch police officer that gets all the big arrests that may be resented by other people in the department. It's just one of those funny things about human nature. Sometimes people take an adversarial posture or an adversarial stance against people who are supposed to be on their side. And you don't have to be a Benedict Arnold to draw the ire of people that are in your various institutions that work alongside you. You don't have to betray them or turn them over to the wolves or do anything like that. You could just simply be better than they are at what they do. That's what makes athletics so interesting. Okay, because you got a bunch of guys that are very good at what they do coming together for a cause, and that cause is winning that athletic event. That's what makes music bands so interesting. You see these amazing guitarists and these amazing drummers and these amazing synthesizer players and these amazing vocalists and these amazing keyboardists and these amazing singers and songwriters all coming together to make masterful music. And there must be cohesion. There must be camaraderie. There has to be a common sense of purpose in order for that music group or that athletic team to prosper, to win, to advance, to do what it is that they set out to do as athletes, entertainers, musicians, etc. And the same is true for people in an office setting. The same is true for people in an office setting. It's not always the hotshot sales leader or the most productive employee or that employee that wins Employee of the Month every month to draw respect or dissatisfaction from their coworkers. People are funny like that. It doesn't have to be your performance anywhere. It could simply be your presence, your face, your demeanor, the way you carry yourself, how you talk, when you talk, why you talk, who favors you and who doesn't favor you. What is the people's attitudes towards you as opposed to the people's attitude towards them? Who do the people look to more for ideas, for tasks? Who looks like they're going to be promoted first, you or the other person? You see? Some people skip all that. They just look at the person's face and go, I don't like the way that person's face looks. I'm going to antagonize them. Or maybe you think that person is better looking than you, or more popular than you, or has a brighter future than you, or just simply has a swagger or a disposition that you wish you could emulate but cannot. Okay? Maybe you're jealous of a person's house. Maybe you're jealous of their car. Maybe you're jealous of his wife and his kids or his family or his yearly income. He took a vacation with his family to a place that you can't afford to take that you can't afford to go on vacation with your family with. Maybe he's more favored at his local church because of what he brings, or because of what he does, or because of his knowledge. Okay, people get jealous of knowledge too. They get jealous of a person's ability to create, their ability to communicate, their ability to project themselves. There are people that get jealous of that. I mean, you don't have to have much of a reason to try to harm another person. You don't have to tell the world what your problem with this person is. You could simply dislike them for this reason or that and decide in your larcenous heart. Okay, your larcenous, malicious, ever hostile heart. Okay, devise a reason to harm this person. Because how dare they do that you can't? Or how dare they apply themselves to that you can, or how dare they achieve that you can, or how dare they be happy with this person or that person that you want to be happy. How dare they be happy? How dare they be prosperous? How dare they be successful? How dare they be safe? How dare they be anything other than what I want for them? In the gangstalking campaign, that person you hate so bad is a target. If he has corrupt liaisons, you can pay him for access to him. Okay? If you talk to the right people, if you get in touch with the right people, you can pay a liaison to do something horrible to a person, or to signal stalkers to do something horrible to a person.
Nog eventjes de blazers in het zonnetje gezet. Ontzettend leuke interactie tussen de solist en de blazers, met name in het laatste deel. Maar ze hebben natuurlijk altijd een klassieke een heel fijne rol.
It's a complex and multi-layered and multifaceted thing. Human feelings or emotions towards another person. Me, I like the philosophers that talked about stoicism and maintaining your focus at all times and keeping your perspective to a pragmatic spectrum. And approaching each day with certainly the same amount of fortitude as you did the previous day. All right? I could never imagine personally, ladies and gentlemen, finding someone that I may have not gotten along with in my life, who I hadn't seen in decades, and trying to organize some harm to that person. You got to be a very emotionally wishy-washy person to do that to a person that you think is unsuspecting. You guys didn't know I could peep out gang stalking a mile away. None of you did. And I know that I do have persons I knew in middle school, high school, college, at various works, at various jobs I've had, and at churches I've attended. I know I have a collective of persons in all of these matters going back 25 years that have plugged into my gang stalking campaign and have found ways to monitor or surveil me and even approach me or encounter me in a covert fashion. Some of you are wearing wigs and disguises. Yeah, the men too. All right, I think I saw one of you actually wearing women's clothes walking down the street one day. Because you didn't want me to think you didn't want me to recognize you, but I saw through that woman's disguise. You understand? A few of you have accused me of calling you a faggot. What I am saying to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that here in the United States of America, where you have the land of the free, you have the home of the brave, you have the resources and tools that any capitalist country, on average, provides to its citizens to make your life as productive, as fruitful, as enjoyable as possible, and that's from the cradle onward. All right, now to the people from church that I think might have been orchestrating stuff, I think a few of you are, I think that it's possible to monitor or surveil a person that you admire. I believe I have admirers that watch me. If I went to church with you and you admired me and I admired you and we were friends and comrades and I fellowshiped with you, you invited me to your home, we did various religious, we sat through various religious programs and so forth, me and your family or in some special event, okay, people that knew they could ask me to do anything for them in my power and I would, and vice versa. Okay, people who definitely conveyed a very powerful disposition of love towards me. Okay, in accordance with your religious principles. Okay, these persons I still feel a very deep kinship to. And these are persons that I hope benefit from my program. But, and that's across the spectrum. As I said, I've had classmates that I favored and who favored me. I've had college peers that I favored and who favored me. I've had work colleagues that have favored me and I them. And the same goes for fellow church congregants. Okay? The difference between me and a lot of people is I vividly remember who I favored and who favored me and who may have not favored me. And that's pretty much across the trajectory of my entire existence here on earth. I just simply don't forget those matters because they're important. You see? I call these people the ghost of Christmas past because, like that movie, if I'm not mistaken, it's called A Christmas Carol. This was a very brilliantly written piece of English literature that I believe originated in England in the 1800s. If I'm not mistaken, it was the poet Charles Dickens that wrote that book. You see Ebenezer Scrooge, he's a local tax collector, if I'm not mistaken. He hates Christmas, he hates people, he hates everything. The only thing he likes is the taxes he collects. And he's always mean to everybody, he's not generous, and eventually he gets approached in a dream by the ghosts of Christmas past. And these various ghosts, which are ancient ghosts. These ghosts are so ancient that they're even older than some of my enemies are, the ones that held grudges for 25 years. Really old ghosts, okay? These ghosts sort of taught Ebenezer Scrooge a lesson in humility. And when Scrooge woke up the next morning on Christmas, he was feeling good. He was feeling great. He fed the poor people. He bought Tiny Tim a new toy. He was spreading Christmas joy all over the place. And that was the new life of Ebenezer Scrooge. All it took was an encounter with the supernatural to make him change his tune towards his fellow man. All right, these people that are popping up from 10, 15, 25 years ago, particularly the ones that didn't terribly care for me at all, or the ones that have a grudge, I don't know what your grudge could be. I keep things pretty businesslike when I'm in an institution. So whatever your fantasy is regarding this infraction or that infraction or this problem or that problem, maybe do like that Michael Jackson song says, look at yourself in the mirror. All right, because I sure as hell ain't looking at you. Not to my will anyway. If you pop up wearing a disguise, or you use some other clandestine mechanism to put yourself in my vicinity, I gotta look at you. I don't necessarily want to look at you. Go look at yourself. Right there in the mirror. It doesn't cost nothing. Just hop out of bed, walk in your bathroom, and just stare at yourself. Until you calm down, until you get your wits about you. Until you regain your sanity. Which is kind of ironic because one of the filters that is supposed to alter the perception of the general public towards targeted individuals is, well, let's just paint them as crazy. Let's just paint them as crazy. You know, so we can dismiss everything that he says. Right? But what's crazier? A sovereign United States citizens clamoring for his constitutional rights and freedoms, like Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, your host, is doing, or getting together with a bunch of disgruntled former acquaintances, using a clandestine signaling and covert disruption mechanism to get in his vicinity, and then take turns following him around the county wearing disguises and making funny gestures. Which sounds crazy to you, ladies and gentlemen? Scenario A or scenario B? I submit to you that scenario B is the crazy scenario. You guys want to put something to rest? Put this to rest. Do something productive with your time. I didn't solicit your company, and if I wanted it, I have the means by which to contact you. I got email, I got social media, I got a phone. If I wanted to contact you, I could. But you decide to use this clandestine espionage mechanism, all of yous, because you just know I'll never find out. You can collect information about me without me knowing and then take it back to all your nosy buds. But this plan is about to backfire on you because anyone that knows you, anyone that knows me by virtue of my own actions, and then anyone who knows about me from you, is going to eventually see my project. And they're eventually going to see that I talk about something called clandestine gangstalking, something that you participate in. And you can deny it all you want. I mean, you likely will. I mean, if you took the time to orchestrate some sort of a espionage cell and spy on me clandestinely, especially if you went out and bought disguises for yourself. I mean, they were real cheap, silly looking disguises, but you went out and paid money so you could spy on somebody you haven't seen in 25 years. You're gonna deny it. You don't want your friends and family to think you're that desperate to settle a grudge. Probably one that doesn't have even a legitimate premise. Just old beefs that you are not man enough to put away. You wanna go through these gymnastics, these psychological and semi-espionage gymnastics that you're doing to put yourself in my vicinity. I feel sorry for you. I thought maybe by this time in your adult lives you'd have something more important, something better to do. I mean, if my project interests you that deeply to where you have to go through all of this just to see me or even disrupt me, because I know a lot of you have some of those stalker methods where you're able to pull strings around me and the behavior of people around me. You just need something better to do with your time. I mean, if my project concerns you to that degree, it means you probably participate in it. And you're afraid of being exposed because this program was supposed to be secret. It was supposed to be clandestine. Ultimately, you have to make a decision within yourself as to just what the hell you're doing and why. If it's to touch base, if it's to be a friend, okay. Gangstalking is a complex matter. You know? There appear to be various methods in gang stalking where messages are relayed in a non-threatening manner. But most of the messages that are communicated to a targeted person through the gang stalking mechanism are very destructive and hostile. So there's a thin line between a friend and an enemy when you're talking about clandestine gang stalking, because it's possible that people who may have liked you in the past use this clandestine signaling mechanism to spy on you anyhow. Does a friend spy on a friend? It's a very complex question. Nobody has to be my friend. I'm not asking for friendship. I'm asking for a group of dedicated, knowledgeable, intelligent, sane, energetic, politically astute, constitutionally aware people from all four corners of the world tuning into my broadcast on a daily basis. The truth will get out about clandestine gang stalking, ladies and gentlemen, and you, the listeners, the participators, will have the opportunity to say years from now, I participated in taking down a horrible political scourge that manifested in my country in a very stealth manner on the coattails of national security legislation post 9/11. A program that has a clandestine nature, a covert nature, a difficult to detect nature. A targeted individual's eye is trained for that very purpose, as opposed to a person who is not a targeted individual. It is difficult for a non-target to identify stalker activity, but someone who's experienced it every day in heightened levels for 10 years like I have, I can pinpoint it a mile away. All right, no government's perfect because no person is perfect. People staff government, so governments can't be perfect. But it's the endeavor to perfection that makes a government worthy of its authority. Okay, if a government is constantly striving for perfection, then it could be a good steward of the land, a good steward of the people, a good steward of the past, the present, and the future of those people. But a government can never be complacent. A government can never be lazy. A government could never be out of date. A government always has to be constantly updating. A government constantly has to be enterprising and innovating and creating new ways to serve the people, to serve its allies, to serve the global economy. A government must constantly strive for perfection, otherwise it loses its authority. It loses its purpose, it loses its cause. And it can no longer legally or lawfully call itself the government of the people. There are stipulations in the Constitution that make sure that the government, our federal establishment, operates with the highest levels of integrity. Gangstalking threatens to damage that reputation, ladies and gentlemen. It's a clandestine signaling and harassment mechanism, and it allows people who may not have your best interest in mind, even people you haven't seen for decades, come out from behind the rocks that they were living under and use a secret or covert espionage mechanism to pester you with. And it's not a fair fight. It's not like a one-on-one game of chess or a one-on-one tennis match or a one-on-one foot race or a home run derby or a bicycle race or a boxing match or a wrestling contest. Okay, it's not a fair fight. It's not a toe-to-toe battle. What these people do, these people descend on targeted people in units. In units. It could be in a given statistical area, one target and 1,000 stalkers at one time being mobilized in synchronous fashion. It's the way of the world, ladies and gentlemen. You know, you hear a lot of talk in political circles about the deep state and about shadow governments and the like. How about clandestine gang stalking as a shadow government? I'm not anti-government, I'm pro-government. Because the absence of government means the presence of anarchy. And let's keep something in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Humans are not that far removed from monkeys, genetically. Do we really want a bunch of people with no government running around? Just think of the horrors that the people of this earth would wage on one another. The savagery, and the brutality that the human race would wreak upon itself if there was no government. There's no end to the madness. that the human race would unleash upon itself if there was no government. Anarchy would be an opportunity for humanity to show, so just who are the toughest people on planet Earth? Because with anarchy, you could essentially do as you please. But ultimately, I think the horror and the sheer terror that humanity would unleash upon itself excuse me, I had to get a sip of water. The pure terror and hell that humanity would unleash upon itself if the authority of government were removed itself is a motivation for the existence of government. Does the human race have a moral objective to keep itself going? Okay? Do humans think collectively to the point to where their existence and the existence of their neighbor are not only of equal value but are dependent on one another? I mean, think of a village in medieval Africa or medieval South Asia or medieval South America. Those villages didn't have police officers. They probably had similar designations for guys that kept a lid on things. But those villages didn't have sophisticated legal proceedings or sophisticated jails or sophisticated governments or constitutions or anything that resembles a sophisticated existence or civilization. It was really just a common sense of decency and a common belief in the gods that held those communities together and stopped those communities from becoming anthropological disasters. And there are no doubt situations where villages were massacred by other villages, or maybe villages were massacred and wiped out by a group of villagers that wanted the whole thing to themselves, or just one villager.
Bij dit avonds vrijdag concert. Aan het begin van de festiviteiten rond 40 jaar omroepmuziek in Vredenburg.
We have sophisticated governments now because as technology changes, as people change, as attitudes change, as society changes, we need a stricter set of laws to keep humanity from destroying itself.
Nog eventjes de blazers in het zonnetje gezet. Ontzettend leuke interactie tussen de solist.
All right, over the centuries, entire populations have been wiped out by outside populations because of internal conflicts. The kind of conflicts that originate from within. And they cause infighting. And a political scientist in the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken, wrote in a book, I'm not exactly sure which or whom at this particular time, but it rings true. People, humans, are political animals. They are naturally inclined to form societies and form rules. Because I think every person realizes the innate fragility in the next person and in humanity. And if we are all to live on this earth, we were born into this earth, we might as well live in this earth, a happy, productive lifestyle. I think humans are increasingly aware that their own happiness and the happiness of their neighbor, okay, the proverbial neighbor, are intertwined. And that humans on this earth have a common sense of trajectory through life, albeit in different societies and cultures around the world. So if humanity is to progress, that means your attitude towards your neighbor, your attitude towards your government, and the government itself must progress and learn more and more about people and human behavior as the generations come and go. And that strive for perfection based on the ideas that the previous generation left for you are essentially the blueprint of human progression. And human progression is dependent on records and documents kept from the successes and failures of previous generations. Gangstalking to me is a failure in social engineering and in behavior modification and in a lot of things. The mark of a good government is one that corrects its mistakes. And I hope and believe that the Congress of this country and its national security apparatus will come to an agreement and a conclusion that that all things are cohesive. All things are cohesive and work together. In various capacities, gangstalking disrupts the balance that the Constitution has laid out and afforded every sovereign citizen as they take their journey through this world. There's a lot of pressure on politicians as it is. I've been harsh on Congress over the past year, particularly in my discourses, because gangstalking is harsh. I don't doubt for a second that most Congress people do their job with integrity and distinction. And I want them to be happy and prosperous just like I want my fellow man to be healthy and prosperous. As a matter of fact, I would like to see every gangstalker go home safely to their families and never do gangstalking again, so that they can have a better life. I think gangstalking degrades the quality of the life of the stalkers too, because they're participating in a state-sanctioned thuggery module. You know, with gangstalkers, I don't hold grudges against you because, you know, as I've said in so many other discourse, you're a useful idiot. And you are used by a malicious, thuggish mechanism, and you allow yourself to be used by it. When you follow a signal, you are obeying your master. Okay, if I tell you to do something and I don't even say it to you, I just signal it to you, and you do it, I am your master. You are obedient to me. You are my slave and not the other way around. You see? And that's pretty much what you have. You have a nation that has a segment of a population that is doing basically forced labor. Slavery is alive and well in this country, ladies and gentlemen, and gang stalkers are the slaves. They answer to other people who know better, who point them in the direction that they need to go in a quiet way so as to give each other the upper hand and to butt other people out. If you're a guy in particular that has a bone to pick or an axe to grind, anything like that, and you ain't man enough to contact me directly or step to me directly, and quite frankly, you ain't the kind of man I want to have anything to do with business-wise anyhow. I'm a fairly introverted person. I can even be shy in certain settings. But I'm just simply not the kind of guy to hold a grudge that long against another guy or whoever, and then use a state-sanctioned mechanism to try and get the better of him. A covert state-sanctioned mechanism, because you don't want to be found out. It would humiliate you. For your mom and your dad and your wife and your kids and your community to know that you participate in clandestine thuggery in your spare time. You told your wife you had to go out of town on a business trip, but really you went out signaling. What's she going to think about you when she finds out? What are your kids going to think? Is my dad a gang stalker? Yes, you bet he is, little buddy. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, even kids. There are juveniles that participate in this. Somebody one time asked me, you think people from certain professions are more likely to be targeted individuals than others? Maybe, maybe not. There are a lot of factors that go into how a targeted person is selected. Some of it has to do with your family, your parents, your grandparents, etc. What kind of life did they live? You could be watched a little closer based on the life your parents lived. For example, I've read and found to be a reliable bit of information that descendants of people who were in the Ku Klux Klan or the Black Panther Party or the American Communist Party in the United States, their descendants are more likely to be surveilled than the descendants of people who were not in these political groups. Because it's possible that your father who was in the Ku Klux Klan, or your father who was a Black Panther, or your father and your mother who were communists in the American Communist Party may have tried to indoctrinate you in political doctrines that the FBI in particular see as disruptive to society. So a person could be well off and successful and hold grudges. Some people just have to feel superior to this person or that. They don't need to feel superior to just anybody. They want to feel superior to you personally, for whatever their reasons are. That kind of malicious wickedness is laughable and pathetic to me. And it doesn't win. I mean, you see, I found out who my stalkers were, and I'm calling them right out today. Of course, I've had comrades in every school, church, college, or athletic program I've ever played on. But I also had critics and persons that wished me harm. Imagine a world where someone who wishes you harm, or a group of people who have known you, who have somehow collaborated on causing you harm, can do so with state resources. This signaling mechanism is governmental in nature. It's too sophisticated to be just townspeople. And it follows you from state to state, so that means it's federal. And it's probably a federal law enforcement, national security, or paramilitary, a federal law enforcement, national security, intelligence, and military co-op that's aimed at keeping a lid on certain people who have maybe exhibited certain behaviors. Are people in the adult entertainment industry targeted individuals? I believe a lot of them are. I think that pornography, its rise in the United States from obscurity in the 1970s to a multi-billion-dollar enterprise in 2025, has alarmed the religious establishment in this country who wields political power. The religious establishment in this country wields political power. It's not supposed to, because of the separation of church and state that is in the founding documents of this country, but churches wield political power. And sometimes churches get these ideas of who the sinners in society are and who deserves punishment by God, the hand of God, and who doesn't. The U.S. federal government is not an instrument of the religious establishment in this country. The military is not an instrument of the religious establishment in this country. The intelligence community is not an instrument of the religious establishment of this country. The law enforcement mechanism in this country is not an instrument of the religious establishment in this country. The police are not an instrument of the religious establishment in this country. The legislature of the United States and all the state and local legislatures are not instruments of the religious establishment in this country. These are separate entities that are secular in nature, that are meant to serve the interest of the mortal person. To combine that with religious ideals, or to give a religious ideal sway over what we know to be a government that is for all, is to give an ideology, a theological ideology, power over the lives of people and their life's trajectory through time and space. That is not fair. And the reason it's not fair is because not everything in the Bible, not everything in the Quran, not everything in Buddhist manuscripts, not everything in religious holy books, not everything in Hindu documents is proven and documented fact. A lot of it is based on experiences people have had with the supernatural that require faith. To believe it. Now, I watched on YouTube recently that Cuba, which is 90 miles off the coast of Florida, is participating in terrorist activity and has aligned itself with terrorist groups. The ambassador of the United States went before the United Nations and said this. Now, as a person that experiences organized espionage tactics here in South Florida, which is predominantly Cuban, this concerns me. Is there a terror cell in the United States in South Florida? Are there active terroristic militants in South Florida? Is there a culture of terrorism here in South Florida, beside gangstalking, which I can promise you is domestic terrorism because it attacks people physically and with germs, using stalkers as the medium? Is there terrorism in South Florida? There would almost have to be. If Cuba is participating and or colluding with known terrorist networks and organizations, that needs to be factored into clandestine gang stalking, because when those terrorists come here, they're going to be using the same espionage tactics that stalkers use, that undercover operatives use, the unprofessional ones, the unprofessional undercover operatives, and their liaisons. So that would mean that this program, gang stalking, can not only be plugged into by people who have a 25-year-old vendetta against you, but it can be plugged into by terrorist networks. Now, throughout my project, I've shown respect to all the religions of the world: Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, even paganism and heathenism and polytheism. These religions that people go to make sense out of their existence. I studied Arabic in college myself. I wanted to study Arabic and Hebrew, but this college that I attended only offered Arabic. And you learn a lot about a people. You learn a lot about religion. You learn a lot about culture. And you learn to respect it. Just like as I read the Hebrew Bible, it led me to respect Hebrew and Jewish culture. Plus, my name is Hebrew. And the Hebrew way of life has always resonated with me because I was raised in the Judeo-Christian faith. Is there a terrorist network in Miami? It's only 90 miles away from Cuba. So if Cuba is being accused on a factual basis publicly, and not just anywhere, but in front of the United Nations, to be a participant in terror or terroristic activities, I need to know about that as a citizen. There needs to be a full investigation. Because how does a terror cell operate in a foreign country? You see? How is it that a terror cell that employs known terrorist groups and networks, how are they able to operate here? How is that possible in the digital age, in the national security age? Not long ago, maybe 3 years now, I reported a bomb threat to the FBI. Someone I knew, well, I didn't know him personally, but I was acquainted with this person loosely because we just happened to be in the general sort of mix-up of things in that particular neighborhood. With respect to, I see this guy at various places around town, etc. Not looking for him, just happen to cross paths, that kind of thing. And once you see a person so many different times and you hear them talk so many different times, you're able to easily identify that person, especially me. That's just, I just identify people. It's just, it's simply my personality. But this guy eventually said that he knew some people in Fort Lauderdale, okay, that were stockpiling propane tanks and preparing to make some sort of a bomb with it. And I reported this to the FBI. This was about 3 years ago. Okay, who stockpiles propane tanks? I mean, is that something you wake up in the morning and decide to do? All right, I'm going to get up, I'm going to prepare myself, I'm going to brush my teeth, I'm going to eat breakfast, I'm going to kiss my kids and my wife on the head, and I'm going to head out into the world so I can find some propane tanks to stack up and keep them in a woodshed somewhere. Okay, that sounds like terrorist activity or plotting a massive attack. Is there a terrorist network here? And are there gang stalkers that are looking to tap into that terrorist network so that they can cause more harm to people? Maybe your work as a gang stalker has not gone as how you wanted it to go. Maybe it hasn't gone as planned because you haven't gotten to harm anybody yet. All those signals you take, all those gestures you identify with, the verbal commands, the vehicular maneuvers, you know how to spot a target based on these signals, don't you, stalker? But you've never gotten to hurt one. Why are there terrorists running around Miami? If Cuba is a participant in terrorism like the ambassador suggested, and this happened this week, within the past 7 days, U.S. ambassador acting on information, intelligence, documents, and evidence argued in front of the United Nations that Cuba is an active state sponsor of terrorism. Now, given that it's 90 miles off the coast of South Florida, and given that the population of South Florida is mostly Cuban, I want my elected officials to tell me if I should be concerned about something. Now, that's not to say Cuban people are more prone to terrorism than anyone else, particularly those living in the United States, because their government might be. That's just me saying this is a unique part of the world. There are other cities and counties throughout the United States that are majority Hispanic. That in itself is not peculiar when you look at the Hispanic trajectory over the past 200 years. Okay? Just like there are certain counties that are mostly African American, there are certain counties that have a large Asian population, there are counties in the United States that have a large Arab or Aryan population. There are counties in the United States that have a large concentration of East Indian people. Okay, there are international counties like Miami-Dade that have a varied mix. But Miami-Dade County is the only county in the world outside of any president in Cuba that has a majority Cuban population. So imagine if we'll use a hypothetical. Let's say that the majority population in Miami-Dade County was Cambodian. Let's say it were 85% Cambodian. And let's say Cambodia, rather than Cuba, was 100 miles off the coast. And a U.S. ambassador goes to the United Nations and say, you know what, I think Cambodia is a state sponsor of terrorism. Would that cause alarm or not? If it's only 100 miles away from our shore and the majority population here is Cambodia. It would make you think that maybe there are Cambodian converts to the terrorist or militant ideology. Okay, I call gangstalking state-sanctioned domestic terrorism, not to threaten or scare the Congress or the Supreme Court or the office of the president. These are offices that are filled with people who have dedicated their lives to legal and political causes. And they've succeeded, and they deserve to enjoy their success. Our elected officials, our departments of defense, our departments of justice, they're staffed with people who embrace a political ideology of law and order, justice, and good governance. They should be applauded for that. What all I want Congress to realize is that it may have, okay, knowingly or unknowingly, negligently or astutely authorized a mechanism in this program that is unconstitutional, hateful, violent, and apparently gets plugged into terrorism at some point. Okay, minus this gang stalking thing, I believe America's best days are ahead of it, not behind it. But gang stalking is like, it's like a disease epidemic, okay? But let's say the epidemic is not viral. Let's say the epidemic is some sort of a bacterial infection. All right, gang stalkers know a lot about bacterial infections. They fling them at people as a part of a signaling mechanism on a daily basis. But let's say that a bacterial situation happens, and it's a superbug. It's resistant to antibiotics. If you don't find a way to kill that bug, that disease, that amoeba, that bacteria, it could do serious damage to people's lives. It could claim lives, and it could harm society. So you got to get rid of the bug. You have to come up with a solution to neutralize the bug, to kill the bug, to eradicate the bug, and to make sure people know what medicines they can take to get rid of it. Gang stalking is that bug, ladies and gentlemen. This is a nasty. It's defiant. It's embedded in the legal code by stealth. It runs on auspices of national security. It's publicly financed. It's an enterprise. It does generate revenues for certain industries. But it's one that undermines the Constitution. It undermines inalienable rights. And if people are targeted individuals from generation to generation, you're eventually going to accumulate enough stories about it to where it's going to have to be investigated and talked about publicly by our elected officials, by our federal judges. It's up to each person to realize just where do they stand on this. This is something that affects all of us. Yeah, there are some people that are targeted individuals and some who are not. But ultimately, the human path through their lifetime is so intimately intertwined with the path of their neighbor that eventually it's going to start affecting everybody. I mean, it's already affected everybody because it's harmed America's image as a constitutional republic, as a democracy, as the place where you can send your tired, your poor, your downtrodden masses, which is the inscription on the Statue of Liberty. Okay, it offers that. Send me your downtrodden here to the United States. We'll observe them for a while, and we might put them in a clandestine gang stalking campaign. You could put that on the Statue of Liberty. Wouldn't that make it interesting? You could rewrite the Constitution. There have been various persons in our governmental system here in the United States, particularly over the past years, that have proposed rewrites and amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Some people might say, well, I like the U.S. Constitution just how it is. Why do they want to rewrite the Constitution? Why do they want to do amendments to the Constitution? What's the matter? Well, the matter is the U.S. Constitution makes it difficult to perpetrate gang stalking campaigns against people legally. The United States Constitution makes that difficult. Okay, all these concepts of life, liberty, and happiness, and the pursuit of these things, and the equality of each person, and inalienable rights, and all these freedoms and so forth that people are born with, and it kind of makes it difficult with all of these rights that are guaranteed to people to perpetually obstruct and terrorize them using state-sanctioned signaling mechanisms. See, the U.S. Constitution makes it a little difficult to do that to people. So there are some people in our governmental establishment that would like to see the Constitution of the United States rewritten so that it allows for a program like gangstalking to exist more comfortably. This program stands to cause quite a bit of embarrassment, shame, and fret for its participants. I mean, could you imagine, ladies and gentlemen, participating in a state-sanctioned signaling mechanism that our Congress probably knows nothing or very little about? Now, I've called Congress negligent in the past, but mind you, there's a context to these things. I believe that Congress is made up of very capable people. It would just be nice to see them use their capacity as Congress people, with all of the resources that they have at their disposal, to not only discover gang stalking, but to understand how and why it was implemented, what its effect on society is, what its effect on the economy is, who stands to benefit from it, and what effect does it have on its subjects. How can America learn from the lessons of gang stalking and just move on? How can America do that? That's the central question here. How did Germany move on from the Hitler era? It identified Hitler's mistakes. It understood his ideology. It saw the wickedness in what was being done. It saw the bloodshed it caused. It saw the international damage that was caused to Germany's reputation. It corrected those things. It acknowledged those things. It made their findings publicly available, and it moved on into the future as a brand new Germany, with more of a sense of the value of each person and more of a sense of a value of a democratic republic. Germany has moved on. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous country. Russia's moved on from some of the controversies of its Soviet past. Iran, North Korea, Vietnam, Japan, Australia, France, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Greece, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Romania, England, Scotland, Wales, the nether regions up north, Greenland, Iceland, Sweden, Russia, Slovakia, Lithuania, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, formerly of the Ottoman Empire, Moldova, Poland, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Ukraine, all of these countries in Europe remember the events of the Second World War, and they've all learned from it. Indeed, the entire world learned from the events of the Second World War and have moved on from it. Let's do the same with clandestine gangstalking. Let's move on from this atrocity. Okay, let's make America sane again. We have capable elected officials at the federal, state, and local level. Yes, I've been harsh on them over the years. But it was out of a sense of necessity, and it was in context to what this program presents itself as. This program presents itself as a community policing mechanism, a national security mechanism, a mechanism that is supposed to make society more effective, more efficient. It is state-sanctioned disenfranchisement on the ground level. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not a joke, and it is not fiction. It is not science fiction. It's not a fantasy. It's reality, and the reason it means something to me is because I experience it. It's against the constitutional precepts that are present in the United States Constitution. The political scientist, the 19th century political scientist Thomas Hobbes, who was one of the noted political commentators of his day. This would have been 2 or 3 generations after the Declaration of Independence was signed and the Constitution was written. He said, this new creation, America, is a Leviathan. A Leviathan is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means very complex, very large, and very powerful. Just like the Leviathans of the Bible. The giant mysterious creature. Some believe it was a super great white shark that was 20 or 30 times the size of the great white sharks that we see today. That it may be extinct now. But that's my definition of a Leviathan. That's what I believe a Leviathan to be. A super massive great white shark. That's maybe the size of a whale. A big blue sperm whale. That's my definition of what this animal is. Yeah, it's a Leviathan. Yeah, it does some stuff right, it does some stuff wrong, but it's up to the citizen to voice his concern, to voice his opinion. That's why we have freedom of speech. It's a brilliant, brilliant amendment to the Constitution that the framers of the Constitution wanted people to have, to protect themselves, not only from their fellow man, not only from institutions, but from government if it gets out of hand. We must act in the interest of the greater good, or as was talked about by the ancient Roman philosophers, the harmonious whole. I believe the philosopher St. Augustine talked about the greater good and how the greater good is in the interest of all, because humans don't differ that much from the next person physically or psychologically. Of course, there are deviations and aberrations and exceptions to the rule, but I think overall, people, persons, they react similarly to similar phenomena, to similar ideas, to similar assertions, to similar sights and sounds and events, institutions and governments, historical matters, political matters, social matters, economic matters, matters of the family, matters of conscience, matters of the supernatural. Okay? If you talk to 5,000 people about each of these matters and then do an in-depth, detailed comparison of their responses, you'll see deviations, you'll see variations in opinion, but the overall trajectory of everything you hear from all 5,000 of these people across all these subjects is the importance of progression. Okay? Learning from the past, learning from the present towards a better future. That's what history is all about. That's what history's been about. It's about learning from past events so as to take those lessons and make your present better, make your future better, and make the future of your progeny and other generations of people better. Okay? The people born in today's world, the people who are living in today's world, appreciate the inventions of yesteryear. We appreciate the congressional and political discussions had over the centuries. We appreciate the advances in science, mathematics, technology, and engineering that were pioneered in times past. We can capitalize on this new knowledge and create better societies with it. Future generations got to be able to look back to 2025, all right, considering a giant meteor doesn't hit Earth and annihilate it before then. But let's say 25 years from now. What will we do in 2025 that will make people who are living in 2050 appreciative? What can we do in 2025 that will make people who are living on the earth in the year 2225, 200 years from now, appreciative of us? I'm glad that generation of people back then did this or that, or learned this or that, or applied this or that, or discovered this or that. It's made our lives better even 200 years later. You know, it's kind of like the Wright brothers, who in the 1800s in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, built and flew the first airplane. It was just a small one-person airplane, but it flew. And the concepts of aerodynamics and jet propulsion and human flight were spawned from that moment. And future generations of people, myself included, look back on that like, you know what? I'm appreciative of the industrious, diligent, scientific study of the Wright brothers, because they pioneered the first airplane, and now we have very efficient airplanes that can get you from one side of the country to the other, or one side of the world to the other. because of that. And it makes humanity more effective. It makes humanity more efficient. It makes humanity better at what it does. You know, you look at the 60s, 70s, and 80s when the first computers were built. You know, 45, 50 years later, here in 2025, people like me who use computers for my occupation can look back on their invention and say, you know what, they did an excellent job putting together this concept called a computer and making it into what we have today. Well, not making it into what we have today, but giving us a blueprint by which to build upon so that we can make supercomputers and things that make humanity more effective and efficient every day, right here today. What will people in the year 2099 say we did in 2025 that made their lives better? That's a heck of a thing to know that something you do today could assist people 5 generations down the line. 90 years, 100 years, 500 years from now, people on the earth will benefit from your work. That's the ultimate reward right there. Well, we stomp out gang stalking. We find out a way to remove the political ideology that formed gang stalking from the general psychological functioning of the American public. Now, ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, what you got to do is just be observant. If something doesn't add up, document it. Okay, gang stalkers will only get away with what you let them get away with. And because there's so many of them acting in so many different ways at so many different times, sometimes it's difficult to avoid all of it. It is a very synchronized, very timed, very efficient, very effective, very sophisticated, very well-resourced, very highly technological, and very malicious stalking and disruptive protocol. And it uses mobs and mobs and mobs and scores of people. From all kinds of backgrounds. Is there a religious element? Yes. There are Christian stalkers out there that'll grab a Bible and flip through it and tell you, this is why gang stalking is okay. Look at this scripture. Look at that scripture. Look at these scriptures. Look at those scriptures. Listen to this sermon my pastor gave. We're God's children. We have a right to do this stuff to you if you're being sinful. Well, maybe if you go and stick your head through a bush real hard and fast, right? And just kind of just stand there for a little bit with your head in the bush. Maybe the friction from the branches on your skull will stimulate your brain to perceive matters in a more logical way. Can a holy book authorize murder, assault, rape, burglary, vandalism, disruption, disease spreading, account hacking, espionage, data interception, mobbing, vehicular assault, harassment, harm, sabotage, disruption, cataclysm, catastrophe, anger, violence, hostility. Corruption. Can your Bible justify all those things? Because all of those elements of gang stalking that I just mentioned is exactly what you're participating in when you use these espionage methods, these covert signaling protocols to disrupt people with. It's as if you found a new toy and you call it signaling and you use it against as many people as possible. You cannot find a scripture anywhere in the Bible that justifies those things. If you read a scripture and you think that these things are being justified and are thus okay for you to do in the form of clandestine gang stalking, then reread the scripture. You misinterpreted it. My significant other and I have read quite a bit of scripture in our day, and it comforts her in her times of uncertainty, because she gets mobbed as well. And I do everything I can to protect her and her interest in mine. The Bible can't justify misbehavior or misconduct, and neither can the federal government. If you're using state resources to commit acts of hostility or violence against a person, and you feel like both your government and your Bible justify it, then reread political documents, reread your Bible. You ain't getting it right. That's why the various Middle Eastern countries have seen high levels of discontentment with their culture, heritage, and religion the world over. Because there are lots of people in this world who maybe have not observed the Quran in its entirety, but have heard narratives coming out of different faiths about what's in the Quran. I haven't read it personally, so I'm not going to comment myself on its contents. But I remember during the Iraq War and through subsequent conflicts with the Middle East, Americans were told over and over that the Quran contained authorizations to do violence to people, the ultimate acts of violence. And without having read the Quran myself, I figured it was probably something similar to the things that you see in the books of Moses. Where Moses authorized certain executions that could be seen as cruel and unusual by today's standards against Israelites who broke certain rules. And there were other commandments that Moses wrote that appeared to authorize acts of violence against non-Israelites, particularly during times of war. Now, cataclysms in war are not terribly uncommon, but some people read those books of Moses not from a historical context. Mind you, Moses was writing laws for a wandering tribe called the Israelites as they reached their destination, which was Canaan. And these rules and regulations were the first legal code for the Israelites, aside from simply what they saw their leaders as giving them messages from God on. See?
Twee solistische
So-
bijdragen had hij met het gezet. We begonnen met Bosmans, Henriette Bosmans, het concertino. Nu dan
Ultimately,
van de Mozart, Colton naar zijn hand. Ja, nog eventjes de
the
blaas.
law of Moses was for the Israelites what the code of Hammurabi was for the Babylonians.
De solist. De blaas.
It was a written legal document that was made
Klassieke concerten.
to ensure that people acted their very best on a daily basis in the interest of society and in the interest of loyalty to Yahweh or the Hebrew God. Just like the Quran, I suspect, was written to encourage Arabs, Middle Easterners, and North Africans to live in a way that is sane and purposeful in accordance with the will of Allah or the God of the Quran, just as Yahweh is the God of the Bible. So, what you have ultimately here in the United States is you have a government that obviously wants to be good. This government wants to be good. It's a democracy. You can vote for your elected officials. You can vote on various issues at the polls. Most of the elected positions in the United States are term-based and have term limits. So people have freedom with who goes in and out of elected offices. The Supreme Court doesn't have term limits, but that's something that some people want. All right. Do I call gang stalkers useful idiots and knuckleheads? Yeah. Is that a term of endearment? No. Do you really mean that? Yes. Why do you mean it, Smith? You may ask yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Well, again, you are bowing your head to another person without a good reason. You are not the master of your own destiny if you're taking signals from other people. So you can go around town creating mischief. Or go into other cities and states and create mischief for people you haven't seen in almost 3 decades. Not because it's the right thing to do, not because it's noble, but because it's mischief you think you can get away with, because it's sophisticated mischief. And it's state-sanctioned mischief disguised as national security protocols. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, you take me for example. My name's Emmanuel Isaiah Smith. That's a Hebrew name. It's the name I've answered to my entire existence on this earth. It puts me in touch with Middle Eastern culture. Because being raised in the Judeo-Christian tradition, all the Bible stories that you hear are centered, most of them, in the Middle East. There are some New Testament stories that take place in Greece and so forth, and in other parts of the world outside of the Middle East, but most of the Bible happens in the Middle East. The Old Testament covers about 4,000 years of history. And the New Testament covers about 100 years of history. There are historical figures in the Bible just as there are non-historical figures in the Bible. Most of the prophets and the apostles and the kings that are mentioned in the Bible with respect to the kings of Israel and so forth, okay, have not been proven as having actually existed. Nor has Jesus Christ been proven to have actually existed. It's something that it just makes sense to some people that we are a creation and that the God of this creation has a son that he wanted to send to earth to preach to mankind and to sacrifice himself for mankind so that mankind has a chance at redemption in the hereafter. That just makes sense to some people and it resonates with some people. It's an attractive story. And it's one that gives people peace of mind as they go through their life. So you must combine the religious element to all this. Okay? Scriptures have been the basis for atrocities that have happened in the world. Some people use religious texts as an excuse to commit atrocities, acting as if, well, I know that what this is saying, and I'm going to do it because it's divinely inspired doctrine. No, you don't. The U.S. Constitution overrides all that. Your religious beliefs are your beliefs. They sustain you personally. And you try to impose those beliefs on me in the way of clandestine laws that allow humans to essentially descend on other humans, you can go right to hell. Those of you that think you can use religious texts and doctrines to justify this crime against humanity called clandestine gangstalking. I mean, imagine a world where people use a signaling mechanism to signal to other motorists to try and run somebody over with their car. And then you turn around and say, well, Jesus said, or Moses said, or this prophet or that prophet or this apostle or that apostle, or the Son of God said, or God himself said right here in this scripture. And then they read the scripture to you and say, that allows me to do what I do. No. What you're going to do is you're going to run into a guy like me, and I'm going to document what I see, and I'm going to post it on social media, and I'm going to make you look like an idiot. For thinking like that, for acting like that. A person doesn't have to do anything. When a person is born into this world, they don't have to do anything or say anything. A person becomes something. A person tries an occupation. A person goes into an activity. A person chooses to live because they found a reason to. Because they believe that it behooves them to live. And not just to live, to thrive, to progress towards something. To find a sense of purpose. To earn a living. To establish himself. To have relationships. possibly raise families and so forth, and pursue other interests. Most people believe it behooves them to do something, to be a part of something, to act on their natural urges in a way that is principled and constructive. You may not have a very good life if from the cradle to the grave you never did anything or said anything. Your worldview would be a deleterious one. Ultimately, a person starts thinking of the hereafter. How does using a state-sanctioned signaling mechanism help you in the hereafter? I assert that it doesn't help you in the hereafter. It hinders you now and in the future. It makes you a slave on earth. And then in the afterlife, if you have to go before your creator, he's going to ask you, well, what the hell were you doing down on earth doing that gangstalking stuff? And you're going to have to make up some lie and say, well, I thought it was for the best. And maybe your creator will hand you a Bible and say, well, open it up to whatever chapter and verse you were reading from and explain to me how this chapter and verse authorizes you to participate in a thuggery mechanism. Well, we must all follow the golden rule. We must forgive and forget and so forth. Well, no, you forgive and forget. I'll forgive and forget when this program is repealed. It'd probably be impossible to find and prosecute every gang stalker, every undercover, every liaison that's ever used this. And mind you, I say the responsible undercovers. I'm not anti-law enforcement. I'm pro-good law enforcement. It'd be literally impossible just about to prosecute everyone that's participated. How do you prosecute? You could pass laws against it. Prosecute it as you see it, just as you'd prosecute any crime. But we need an acknowledgement of this thing. I think sometimes the national security and intelligence apparatus of this country gets ahead of itself, and Congress has to sort of pull open the veil and say, what are you doing in there? I don't wish harm to befall anybody. Not generally anyway. If they're trying to harm me, then I would rather they be harmed than I, or my significant other, or my progeny. Imagine attempting to be an upstanding citizen when you're in a clandestine gang stalking campaign. How easy or difficult do you think it would be, given the degree of your disruptions? If you're disrupted everywhere, every day, how could you live the society-approved life? Or, as some might say, the life that's prescribed in scriptures? How are you supposed to do that? It's almost as if gang stalkers are attempting to engineer hell. We can send this, we can make sure this person or that person goes to hell. We can eventually moderate who gets into heaven. All we have to do is disrupt the people that we want to go to hell, and they will likely develop behaviors that are not prescribed in the scriptures. once these targeted people develop those behaviors, those phobias, those anxieties that are not prescribed by Jesus Christ, then that'll increase the likelihood that they'll go to hell. And by manipulating people's world, their surroundings, their encounters, their opportunities in life, we can affect their afterlife too. And that's what a lot of gang stalking is, ladies and gentlemen, is people playing God. Do I respect religions? Yes. I respect all denominations of Christianity, including the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, of which I was a member for 2.5 years. Okay, it's an unorthodox Christianity, but they have a principled system that they live by. And one of those principles is to contribute to society. And as I've said, I fellowship with many members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that I still care for very deeply this very day. Now, my tenure in the church was aberrated and sporadic and eventful, but so was a gang stalking campaign. And I didn't want to drag the members of that church into my gang stalking campaign by telling them about it and asking them what can they do. This is my fight. I didn't want to drag them into it. And I think over time, when the gang stalking campaign started picking up, this was in 2015, 2016, that time frame, I started suspecting that maybe there were church elements involved. And there's definitely a religious underpinning in clandestine gang stalking. Targeted individuals are oftentimes approached by traveling ministers or proselytizers or people just wanting to walk up